There's a timeless kids game called Monkey in the Middle, Pickle in the Middle, or as most people know it, Piggy in the Middle. However, this film is not about playing games. There's no production company, director, or cinematographer, and everyone's identities have been protected during filming, which was done by a determined parent, someone determined to be a parent, and determined to stop all children from becoming the kiddy in the middle.
But who are you? What's your name? And can you tell me about your case?
I'm sorry, but just by talking to you in my real voice, I could be imprisoned for a year.
Why is this such a secret?
Like most dads, or a lot of dads, I guess, or first-time dads in particular, I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know, the rules, and it was all a big learning curve. I think there's a lot of dads, and certainly a lot of my mates say, oh geez, I'm not ready for kids yet, I've got to do this, I've got another project, got to do the car up first, or paint the house or something. But really it's one of those things that I think just at some point you've just got to say, yeah, my life's now going to change.
I'm a father of 6 kids, ranging from 15 years of age down to 15 months.
Being a dad did change my life because my children were my focus. Everything was about my children. We'd go down the beach, we'd go down the pool, we'd go across the park. My time revolved around them because family is the most important thing or institution you'll ever be involved in. And your children are part of that. They're the greatest part. Putting the time in with my kids was a joy, so I made sure my kids were first. Even though I was still involved in a lot of things, they came first and I organised everything else around them.
It was the Aussie dream, bringing up a child in with that great weather and the surf, the sand, the parks. It's such a great place to raise a family. Just that phase of my life was just a magic time. We were just very happily in love, and love with each other, and love with our beautiful little daughter.
I grew up with a very loving father, and I don't think couldn't have been a better father, but I don't think he probably did 3/4 of what I do with my kids around nappies and changing them, and my wife going out to dinner with friends, and me being at home with the 6 kids, and I juggle them and deal with it, and I'm okay with it, and I've taken kids to mothers groups and all right with all that. I think the reality is that women's roles have changed significantly, which has allowed more space for men to come into those areas.
As men, we're living in really interesting times because there's been such profound change in gender roles and gender relations in the last half century or so. And whatever aspect of gender you look at, whether it's men's and women's lives in the bedroom or the boardroom or on the street or anywhere, there's both change and stability.
I can't breastfeed, I know that, but beyond that I can do most things that my kids require when it comes to care. Do I do it better than my wife? No, I do it different. And that's not better nor worse, just different.
I think for some men, myself included, this has involved a real opening up of our choices to be involved with kids, to have more trusting and respectful and pleasurable relationships with women, to have closer friendship with other men. So my sense is that the profound shifts in gender have actually been really good for men in all sorts of ways.
And I think that's a fantastic thing. I wouldn't want it any other way, and I think what we realise is that kids want it as well. Children want that.
But there's no doubt some men struggle. Some men do feel a sense of crisis, a sense of, I don't know what kind of man to be.
If we didn't see our fathers doing it, then how do we comprehend how men do it? And I don't think historically we've had good role models around how to be hands-on fathers. I think it's really hard for men. What was common years ago was family would all live around an area together. They all grew up in a suburb. And that provided some issues, because if you had angst with some of your in-laws, then hey, it was there in your face all the time. But what it also provided was they provided the advice. They provided that listening ear. And I do think as a society we've lost a lot of that.
According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the most common living arrangement for Australians from 1996 to 2011 was in a 2-parent family with children. The most notable change in the future is the projected increase in the number of 1-parent families from 47% to 70%, with around 4 out of 5 1-parent families being headed by a female. This means by 2036, there may be as many as 1.4 million Australian families without a father figure at home.
I think it's coming up 8 or 9 years since I've seen my children. I have no contact. I haven't seen a school report. I wouldn't have a clue what their friends are, what they do, and it's soul destroying.
I just got home from work, and normally my daughter would be home from childcare, and yeah, I'll be getting ready for dinner or getting ready for a bath and bed. And this day there was nobody around, and I got a call from the mum later than normal saying, "Oh yeah, we're running a bit late, but we'll be home soon." It got to 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and there was still no daughter and no mum. Obviously I was ringing her phone every 5 minutes to find out what was happening, and no one was picking up. So I thought, oh, this is just wrong. So I called the police and I said, yeah, look, I know it hasn't been very long, but my daughter's somewhere with her mum, and they said that they were going to be home. They're not. It's 10 o'clock. Within, I don't know, half an hour or so, there was a knock at the front door, and there were a couple of cops saying, oh yeah, can we come in and talk about your child and her mum? I was like, yeah, sure, come in. And so welcomed them in, and the first thing they said to me is, you know, that thing that they say, you know, we've got to warn you that anything you say may be written and down and used in evidence against you, or whatever it is. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I was absolutely worried to death about what was happening to my little girl, and what at 10 o'clock at night with no news or no knowledge. And then out of the blue, here I am expecting 2 officers to help me out, and they, you know, basically cuffed me up and walked me up, stuck me in the back of a paddy wagon, took me into the police station. I have no idea what was going on at all, and they've said that, yeah, your wife has made allegations that you've hit her, and we've charged you with common assault. It was 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning. The cops said, okay, we've done interviewing you, we'll take you back. Oh, by the way, you're not allowed to go home again now. You can take a little bag of belongings with you, and then you'll have to find somewhere else to live.
Domestic or intimate partner violence is a common and devastating problem in Australia. A reported 1 in 6 women and 1 in 19 men experience physical or sexual violence from a current or former partner in their lifetime. In 2012, the Personal Safety Survey found that 17% of adult women and 5% of adult men surveyed had experienced violence by a partner since the age of 15.
Most men treat the women and girls in their lives with respect and care. Most men don't use violence, at least the bluntest forms of violence. But many of us don't speak up. Many of us turn a blind eye to the violence and the sexism and the abuse that a minority of men perpetrate. And we have to speak up. One of the things I try to argue is that violence against women is a men's issue. It's a men's issue because violence by a minority of men gives all men a bad name.
Domestic violence is a very serious issue in Australian society, as it is in many, maybe all other societies. Child abuse is a very serious issue in our society, and I favour erring on the side of the protection of vulnerable women and children.
So the magistrate's hearing was a few months later, so I was there just going, oh, this is just the biggest cock and bull ever. Everyone in the court is solemn-faced and you know, taking all the facts in and listening seriously, and I was like, this is just crazy, that like she's just making up a whole load of other stuff. Then at the end, I think is the normal time that I would stand up and give my evidence, and the magistrate basically cut it short. She said, okay, we don't need to hear anything. I'll come back and give you my decision in a few minutes. I was like, I need to set the record straight because she's heard all of this complete rubbish. After a very, I don't know, nervous 20 minutes or so, I guess, waiting, the magistrate came back in and sat everyone down and said, oh yeah, you know, get on with, we'll get on with her summing up of the case and all the evidence. I was like, oh man, they're gonna lock me up and throw away the key. But, you know, thankfully, it was the complete opposite. The magistrate actually said words to the effect that it's a complete pack of lies, nothing makes sense, and even if it does make sense, it wouldn't constitute an assault anyway. And that was it. Apparently it was over, and yeah, I was through the roof because I really thought it was going to go south. It seemed very bizarre to me that it could even get to court, but one of the arresting police officers was there and he bumped into me. It was really surprising because he said to me, "Oh, I'm sorry mate that you're here." And he said, "I shouldn't have arrested you, but you know, we've got to in these cases. If someone says something, no matter how unbelievable, no matter if there's no evidence, we have to take you in." And I was like, oh, like I thought police officers kind of like used their judgment and looked for evidence, and if there was a reason, then they acted on it. And he was like, no, not in those kind of allegations. If they allege that anything has been happened, we always will lock the other person up. Then they had this process that she still wanted an AVO on me. And the magistrate said, well, no, there's no reason for an AVO. And they said, okay, well, if you dispute it, you have to go back to court again to decide about this AVO. And I thought, oh, I don't want to go back to court again. Like, just being dragged through all this stuff once is bad enough. If she wants an AVO, I'll admit to having an AVO because I'm not going to do anything anyway. And if that's going to keep her quiet, keep her comfortable for whatever reason, then fine. And so thankfully 5 minutes later it was all packed up and we could get down to the pub for a well-earned beer.
I'm Sue Price, I'm a director of Men's Rights Agency, and we started Men's Rights in 1994 in an attempt to provide some services for men who are going through difficulties with child support, family law, not seeing their kids, domestic violence issues, all the things that go along with family separation. When a man receives a domestic violence order, if he has not committed domestic violence, he should never accept an order with no admissions. A great deal of pressure will be put on him to accept this order. It'll be his own solicitor may say to him, oh look, you don't want to waste money fighting this. The magistrate will certainly say, we'd recommend that you accept an order with no admissions. The police prosecutor will suggest that, and eventually he's in a situation, in a court, stressful situation, and he'll say, oh, what the heck, and he'll accept it with no admissions. Unfortunately, that statement of no admissions never sees the light of day again. It's on police record as you're a domestic violence perpetrator. It goes into family court as she's got a domestic violence order against you. If you have not committed domestic violence, for heaven's sake, ask the magistrate to set it down for a hearing so that you can defend yourself.
Apprehended violence orders and restraining orders in other jurisdictions have been controversial for years. I think they play a very important role. But there is this concern in community surveys, a concern that women might use them strategically in family law disputes. And if there was a history of violence, what you want to hear from the witnesses is about that history of violence. You absolutely want to know about that. And if he denies it, then let him tell his story to the judge as well. But the fact that some magistrate 2 years earlier made an order in a 4-minute hearing based upon untested evidence is neither here nor there. So I actually think it's one of those areas where the whole system would be a lot better if we did not require judges to refer to apprehended violence orders, and rather we asked them to look seriously at the history of alleged violence in the case.
When the verdict was given, she didn't seem that upset, and I was a bit surprised because I thought, you know, obviously she'd be, you know, distraught with having gone through all that process for seemingly nothing. But apparently not, because yeah, I was later to learn that it wasn't about that hearing at all. It was about the family court, and yeah, just those allegations were just the tip of the iceberg, and it's what got the ball rolling down the hill.
Allegations are very easily made, and they can be very hard to disprove.
It is significant, and to my mind, it is done deliberately. Some entire fabrication, some exaggeration, and some absolutely true. I'm not saying for a moment that family violence does not exist. That was never my intention, and it's still not my intention. It is used as a weapon. I can't give you a percentage of cases, but I am satisfied that in a way that was not done in the early days of the Act, it is now done.
We're talking about allegations that are untrue, then my view is clearly there are more women making such allegations than men.
We need a situation where when people come into the family courts of Australia, if they tell lies that can be proven against them, the book is thrown at them. Unless and until that happens, we will have people thinking they can lie in the witness box freely, and that is a significant problem in family law disputes. Another problem over many years is that orders are not properly enforced, and that's been a big complaint of some parents.
Well, of course, this has always been one of the major criticisms that's been brought against the family court, that it really won't enforce its own orders.
The judge looked at her in amazement. Everyone in that court knew that she was telling fibs. Did it matter? Not the slightest. She was allowed to.
I think the court blames the Attorney General's Department, and the Attorney General's Department blames the court for not doing anything. So people get away with lying, telling whatever stories they want to tell, just to gain the advantage.
There's nothing in the Family Law Act that deals with perjury. People can be charged with perjury in the family court, but it requires the Attorney General's fiat to do so. I've sent cases to the Attorney General. Most judges have during some time in their career, and nothing is done.
The first thing I heard is, we can't do mediation because there's a risk of domestic violence, or the history of domestic violence. And I was like, what? No, there's not. We've been through all that rigmarole. The magistrate said her story was a complete load of rubbish and it got kicked out. Oh, apparently that doesn't matter. Right, okay. And the police, they said I was lucky that I was seeing my daughter at all. And again, it's one of those moments where you just think, right, so I've been kicked out of my house, don't have any of my possessions, been bumming on sofas and all that for a few weeks, had to go through court, and I'm lucky because I get to see my daughter like for 6 or 8 hours a week instead of every day. Okay, all right, well, if that's what you reckon, what about all the days before? Like, I would get up on Saturday morning and take care of her the whole day, and every night when I came home from work, and every morning when I got up from work. Oh no, that doesn't matter. In the last few weeks, you haven't had much contact with her. Same thing with the family appointed psychologist. We had to go to this expert to see how each of our relationships were with our daughter. It was meant to be 2 hours with each. The mother and the child had about 2.5 hours together, and then I had to squeeze in an hour and a half, which turned out to be about half an hour, because by that time my daughter was so tired that it was well past her nap time, and she was basically falling asleep. So a whole load of stuff that the judge used was out of this assessment with a child who was a complete stranger to a parent, to a professional who has no knowledge about me, no knowledge about how my relationship is with my daughter on a day-to-day basis, and only provided a fraction of the time with me that she talked to the mother. And the same thing was in the family court, so we were in there for 5 days talking about stuff, and the mother had I think it was about 2 hours in front of the various people talking about evidence, and I was absolutely grilled, pumped and hammered it was over 3 days continuously by people who were looking to turn everything into some kind of accusation that I was a bad husband, a bad father, and generally a bad person.
When you tell people that I don't see my children, first question is, what did you do? With an inference being, you must have molested them or something. It didn't happen. Nothing like that happened.
Men will find themselves disadvantaged initially, and they then have the choice. They either accept it or they do something about it. Don't speed, don't drink too much, don't leave the children with other people. Keep her advised as to what you're doing. If you're going to take the children away for a weekend, let her know. He has got to live a godly life, is the only way I can put it. The bottom line is that men often do themselves more harm than good. They get frustrated and they get angry. And of course, that gives the heaven-sent opportunity to the wife to say, see, I told you. Can't control himself. Look at him. And here is a man who is, in effect, tried by all patience.
The family law system in this country, but in many other parts of the world also, is grossly overstretched. It cannot cope with the numbers of people who are separating and who are having disputes about their children.
The courts are under-resourced. We don't have enough judges, either family court judges or federal circuit court judges.
Judges we need in family law are people with very good experience of life and of children, and their knowledge of the laws of evidence or a procedure are probably less important than their knowledge of what a 4-year-old girl needs.
Anyone can be subject to the full wrath of the family law courts, and it just from start to end, it was just a horrific process of burning money for nothing, being completely and utterly, the only word I can use is discriminated against, basically because I was a father.
The family court system is completely biased, it is not fair, it doesn't help anyone, and I think it's more destructive to the children than to anyone else.
The reality is that the numbers of children living apart from mum and dad by the age of 15 now has almost doubled within a generation. A lot of these parents have never lived together even. So we are reaping the whirlwind from what we have sown in terms of social change in the last few years.
And the system can be manipulated. I'm not saying the system's at fault, but I'm saying manipulation, as with any system, the tax system, criminal law system, you can manipulate anything if you're determined to do it. And there will always be people out there who are prepared to tell you how to.
Domestic violence is a key issue. We want to strive to behave in positive and egalitarian and respectful and playful and joyous ways as fathers and as partners and so on. And we should be passionately critical of violence and abuse, whether it's by fathers, by mothers, by anybody, because it's so corrupting, so toxic in families and relationships.
There was a little bit of violence. I was belted a number of times, and the last time I got belted, I was that close to hitting back that if I had to, I wouldn't have stopped. So I didn't hit at all. I just grabbed my hands behind my back and just wore it, and that was time to go. That was the worst experience to be belted as an adult. The last time was horrendous. I'm ashamed to admit that I was hit, but what do? You just accept it. I wasn't going to fight back on things like that because I think violence is atrocious no matter if it's committed by whoever. Violence is wrong.
There are societal pressures. It is perfectly all right for a woman to say, I've been the subject of violence. For a man to say, I've been the subject of violence, what do you want about it? Man up. Suck it up, princess. All those things.
There's not sympathy there for men. The man goes in, says to a policeman, look, my wife's been beating me up, what do I do about it? Oh, come on, mate, aren't you big enough to look after yourself? Come on, you can look after yourself, you don't need our police protection. And that's the attitude that you get. He feels demeaned, diminished. A woman's hit him, he's admitting it to the world. He feels saddened, he still loves her, and it can be devastating. I've spoken to men who are the complete nervous wrecks. That's the only way to describe them. They're terrified to move, terrified to do anything. They're hesitant, they don't know their own mind, they don't know what they should be doing.
You think it'll only happen once, but it doesn't, it continues, and you don't know what you can do to stop it, because no one's going to believe you. Grown man gets hit by a woman. I didn't tell any of my mates about being hit. I didn't even really tell my parents, because it's humiliating. You don't want to admit that you're getting belted. You don't want to say things like that to anyone.
If you read the media, if you believe what you're told, it's always the man who's the perpetrator of the abuse. And of course that's not true. But those figures aren't known because nobody wants to talk about it.
Men in the community, particularly powerful men and public men, have an enormously influential role in shaping young people's, and I think everybody's, perceptions of men and manhood. And we see that, where that's most obvious is when it happens badly. When, for example, a male celebrity or a male sporting figure behaves badly, and the kind of men behaving badly story in the media is a regular story. So the the footballer who assaults his wife, or the male political figure who physically assaults someone else, or who behaves corruptly, and so on.
I could be violent, but I chose not to be. Violence is not accepted by anyone.
Most fathers, like most men, don't use violence. And fathers can play a powerful role in talking to their sons and daughters about relationships, about healthy, respectful relationships, and in modelling non-violence in their own families. And I say this knowing that parenting is hard. I mean, I've got 2 young kids. I find parenting incredibly challenging sometimes.
When people are separating, sometimes it's an amicable separation. Both people realise that they shouldn't be together at the moment. Some people carry the scars and the wounds of the relationship better than others, and I think some people are willing to hit out and hurt the other parent.
Often you get the feeling very quickly in the case that one of them wants to be there at all cost and the other doesn't want to be there at all. But by then the fight is on.
Parental alienation is when conflicting parents and family members alienate the other parent and sometimes the family too. From little people like me using whatever means necessary, including using their own child as a weapon and taking advantage of legal loopholes and social services. The alienators don't realise that the person they're actually hurting the most is me.
I know they said they like speaking to you. I've changed our phone numbers. We don't have to worry anymore.
Parental alienation can happen because one parent will intentionally direct the children's care and affection against the other parent. And that has a result of the kid then not wanting to see either mum or dad. My view of it is they'll side with the one who they feel needs most protection sometimes, and therefore they'll move against the other parent quite readily.
My biggest fears for my children is that they'll never see myself or their extended family on this side. I think it'd be an absolute shame.
For kids when they're growing up, they're starting to develop a picture of the world. What's safe, what's not safe, what's good, what's bad, what's true, what's wrong, what's right, what's not right. And as far as continuing to form a positive relationship with the child, that's made more difficult. And I believe that the best thing for children can be if they can have a relationship with both their mum and their dad, all things being equal.
My side of the family were ostracised completely. No one would come to my place because it was just too hard. It was just too much tension, so they were made feel very unwelcome. However, if her family came, the situation changed. It was all joy, lovey-dovey, because they were there. She put on a show for each side.
It's often said in the academic literature that mums are gatekeepers. And there is a sense in that in which that is true, that the gatekeepers of the father-child relationship, if the child is living with mum, then she has the most power in the situation where they cannot agree.
One of the images we use with families, with parents post-separation, is that of the bridge, and that the child walks between the bridge, and a pillar on one side is mum, a pillar on the other side is dad. If you try and remain that friendly, visible, present pillar who perhaps ignores some of the slings and arrows and goes, you know what, for my child's sake, I'm going to just ignore that one and I'll try and be present for them, knowing that that's going to mean that there's that ongoing relationship, then that's a better thing than being an absent pillar and then the bridge just falls down and collapses totally.
She was out to be destructive, and it didn't worry who she was destructive to, and I think the children are the ones that have suffered the most.
My family being in Australia, I have aunties, uncles, grandparents, cousins that all want to speak to my daughter, and now suddenly they were completely excluded from her. They'd even flown in for her birthday, and suddenly at the last minute, Mum said, no, sorry, can't see her.
It is not by choice. I would have done anything to have contact with my children.
I imagine for a parent who's being alienated and having those children used against them like a weapon, it must be devastating, and that's probably a very light word for it.
After 2 weeks of having been on my own and trying to get used to a relationship with my daughter over the computer, I got a letter from the child support agency saying, oh well, now that you don't have any care of your daughter, you have to pay 100% of the child support. And I had to read it twice just to check that it was a real letter, that it wasn't like some kind of sick joke, and then I had to read it about 20 more times just to understand the process.
They bully you, they blackmail you, I don't think they support the child in the slightest, because they don't tell you how the money's spent. It just is given over.
The final, the nail is the child support agency. I don't think anyone disagrees with the idea of parents paying for their children, but CSA have now developed into an organisation where I'm quite sure some of the staff consider it as a punitive measure to be able to attack and to cause the greatest grief to the people who are most vulnerable.
When you are financially crippled, on top of being emotionally crippled, you do give up. You give up everything. You give up on life. It is devastating.
It's a sad, sad testament to our society. 35 men each and every week suicide in Australia. And I talk to people almost on a daily basis about this, and everyone's shocked. I attempted suicide in the year 2000, and there was a call for a public forum about men's health. I attended that forum, and as a result, we decided to start an organisation to run support groups for dads.
With the judge giving me no time at all with my children, it did put me in a bad position, because my whole mental state collapsed from that point on. I did slip into a depression. I didn't move off my lounge for, I'd say, over 6 months. I had internal fights with my family, my brothers and that, and I didn't even know why.
There are people out there that think that the child support agency is one of the protagonists of that high suicide rate in Australia, is because, you know, people like this particular dad, and there's other dads out there, they just get pushed to the brink, you know, and they just don't understand it, and they see no other way out, you know, it overcomes them.
I think it's to do with how men are brought up, how men are taught they should be, and some of the lessons they get from society about what it's like to be a man. And that can lead or funnel men into thinking that the only resource they can fall back on when times are tough is themselves. They can't take the step of asking for assistance. They find it just that more difficult to reach out and talk to people about their vulnerability. And that's a barrier we need as a society to do something about. We can't allow that to continue. We can't allow that to be the contributing factor, or one of the contributing factors, towards this enormous loss of life within our society.
I believe it's okay for men to seek help. Counselling wouldn't be as prominent in our society as it was if talking didn't help. Talking helps. Going to the pub and having half a dozen schooners and just talking about the footy or whatever meaningless stuff doesn't help in the end. There is a certain stubbornness and pride in men that they, you know, I should be able to do it on my own. And some of this might go back to our fathers because they did it on their own. So I think that's embedded deeply in many of us. And I suppose the role models we see are men who can do stuff.
It can be quite difficult for a man to admit that there's vulnerability in their life, or that things aren't working the way they want them to do and want them to work. And so to make that first call to a service like Men's Line can be quite a challenging thing, and often it's the first 10 or 15 minutes of that first conversation that's critical. The man is possibly talking openly for the first time in his life about the things that are not going well, and that first 15 minutes can set the context for much longer and much more meaningful conversations about what it is to be a man, the pressures that are on men, their vulnerabilities, their frailties, their successes, their failures, the things that are working well in their life, and the things that they're really unhappy about.
When many men face challenges and difficulties, they sometimes choose less healthy options. And so drug and alcohol issues can come in. not talking about it and trying to repress it, which leads to lack of sleep, which means when you need to get up in the morning and go to work, you're just dog-tired, which ultimately can lead to someone starting to feel very sad, that can lead into depression. And unfortunately, there is higher rates of suicide of men post-separation.
There was great concerns that was I going to live or die, and I can honestly say that I most probably at times didn't care less. I thought about suicide every day for 9 months, and I still have tendencies to go down that path now, but I know what triggers it, and that is when I start thinking about my children.
We know that suicide in men is the 10th leading cause of death. The burden to society, the burden economically, financially, socially, to families, to workmates, to colleagues, to friends, is enormous, and this is preventable.
The hurt is indescribable. I don't know, even now, and this is 10 years later, I still think about my kids every moment. What I do if I see them, what can I do? Would I be able to relate to them? Would I be this? Would I be that? It's nothing that compares to this pain, because it's just a numbing, it numbs you.
It's very difficult when everything becomes uncertain, when the things that you felt were clear and were going to be there permanently suddenly change. And they suddenly change because of factors outside your control. The person you're with or the person you love says they no longer love you. And that's incredibly challenging, both for men and for women. But men generally don't have that emotional resilience or that emotional insight to be able to start to work their way through immediately or start to think more reflectively about what's happening. It's like they go into a state of shock.
I'm always upset about this. Do I cry? No, I've got nothing left. So I might sound a little bit impersonal at times, but it's because I've lost everything.
The thing that is really most common in people who have reached that stage is a feeling of absolute isolation, a feeling that there is no one that they can turn to. And that's where services such as ours, Men's Line or some of the other services, really provides an opportunity for a person to connect with someone who actually does care and will work with them to remove that feeling of isolation.
We find that dads, when they do connect with us, all of a sudden we show them that glimmer. We show them that little light at the end of the tunnel, and it's something worth getting up for the next day. But if you isolate yourself, you don't have that opportunity. You look into that tunnel and you can't see anything. There's no way out. Quite often men, they'll turn to self-medication through drugs and alcohol, and then at some point they make that decision that life would be better off without them.
They've lost their family, they've lost their children, they've lost their home, they've lost any investment that they had, any financial investment, and they've lost any notion of a future. Once that happens, it's the end for them.
And that is when people in the past, and I suspect in the future, will do horrific things as a result of denial of time with a child. That's been behind most of our tragedies.
The loss to the community, the loss to the family is immense. I remember one of our first clients. He was a farmer from out west, and he had 3 children, I think. His wife was an accountant. She then decided that the children were going to live with her. Their relationship was over. He went through court, he went through all this. He finally got property settlement done, but he'd lost everything. And he came home one day, and his 18-year-old son, I think it was, had taken a shotgun to himself and killed himself because there was nothing left for him. He saw how his father had been treated. He saw how they'd lost the farm, which was his love, and that's what he did. That was his way out of an unbearable situation.
According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, there are almost 8 deaths by suicide in Australia each day. Males account for 75% of deaths by suicide, and suicide accounts for up to 35% of all deaths amongst young men. For those of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent, the suicide rate is 2.5 to 3 times higher. And according to Lifeline, for every completed suicide, it is estimated that as many as 30 people attempt, which is around 200 attempts per day, 1 every 10 minutes. or 4 since you started watching this documentary?
Well, role models are critical, and you learn from your parents. They're the major role models in your life. But part of evolving and part of developing is separating and learning what your strengths and qualities are as a person.
My work with young men, particularly in homelessness services and drug and alcohol programs, if someone had said to me, what's commonplace in these boys that you're seeing that's providing them with problems, and I would say it would have been a lack of male role models.
There's just no way that her life is better without me. You know, of course, having a loving parent is a great thing, and a mum has always been a loving parent, but mums, you know, just do different things than what dads do. You know, I know that when I was hanging my daughter upside down and she was laughing her head off, just absolutely screaming with delight, that the mum can't do that, and that's fair enough. But just because I'm a dad, why does it mean that I can only do that for a handful of days a year?
Boys need their dads. Girls also need their dads. That's where they learn. They learn from their father what sort of level of respect to expect from the man in their life, or how to be treated by the way the father acts and the father treats them. Father gives the girl confidence.
We can help our children emotionally regulate. They can see men naming their emotions and taking responsibility for when we get angry or frustrated, and, you know, talking through and communicating well instead of saying, I want this, I want so and so. We get them to say, that's great, what do you think Johnny needs? What do you think Johnny might want? It's about getting them to think about, what do you see yourself working towards at the moment? What is the goal as a family? What's your goal as an individual? It's really good if families can work out issues and they actually provide and show their children that differences of opinion occur, that people always don't get along, but it's how you resolve that conflict and how you move forward. It is a really a difficult one that I don't underestimate how challenging that could be for people. I think trying to come at it in a really positive way, that would be the first step, and you know, if that was unsuccessful, then I think, you know, one needs to then come to places like us. What would happen then is we do an intake with the person who comes in and hear the story. We then invite the other parent in and do the same thing there, and we run a parallel process and eventually bring both parents together to discuss what's in the best interest of the children.
These sorts of non-legal solutions will be far better for families who will accept it and will work with it than going to court. But if you do go to court and you have to have a judge to decide, nobody's a winner in most of these cases. It's hard for the courts, it's hard for the parents.
Everything should be done to avoid a hearing, because at the end of the hearing, both parties are going to be shattered. Probably financially, certainly emotionally. And who's going to wear that? The children.
Has anyone actually thought, no, I'm a bloody good father, and my daughter has every right for me to be in her life? That just doesn't come into anyone's thinking. They're just like, no, got to do some affidavits, got to do some forms, got to be grilled by someone.
Mothers often considering it their right that shouldn't be argued with. Fathers quite properly saying, I'm as good a parent as she is. And the bitterness that can engender. And of course, whilst the parents are doing this, the children are slap bang in the middle of it. That's the tragedy of it. I have no doubt that there are many, many, many genuine fathers out there who feel that their skills, their intelligence, and their commitment are not being properly recognised.
If I hadn't known the outcome, I wouldn't have set out the same path, but I wanted to be a father to my children more than anything. I wanted to be a good father and to give them direction in life.
Some guys only get letters, some guys only get cards. You know, it's us lucky ones that get the weekends and the school holidays. But even if you are only getting the letters and cards, keep the contact there, because your kids are going to want to know you.
I survive, but I don't really drink, I don't smoke, I don't gamble, I live a very sombre life. However, I do still go to footy once a week, and I go out of a night time once a week.
There's some really serious consequences of not having a male role model in children's lives. You know, the best male role model is their dad. If their dad's not available for whatever reason, it's still important that those children have a male role model.
It's sad because in the end, it's the kids who are getting harmed within this. That if they're not able to have that meaningful relationship with a loving parent who wants that, you know, that's not in the best interest of the children.
It's really the kids that suffer. They don't have that capacity to understand as much as we do, you know, and there's loads of kids out there, thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids out there. You've only got to go to schools and see how many kids are actually living in one-parent households.
It's my daughter who's suffering the most. Like, she's just a little girl. Why does she have to have her life without me in it now? You know, she's done nothing to deserve all of this stuff.
So it's important that for our kids, that they get some support around it. Quite often, kids actually sit there in their own little quiet world, blaming themselves for their parents' eventual split up and divorce. Those children need support, so when they mature and they start having relationships, they can have healthy relationships.
Isn't our baby beautiful?
Just perfect.
I just need a break. I'm exhausted.
I've had a horrible day at work. I just need some peace.
Baby is sick.
It's not my turn to get up tonight.
That's it. I can't cope. You need to move out, as I want a divorce.
This sucks. I hate all this paperwork. I'm just so fed up.
Mummy, I'm here. Where are you?
Sorry, I can't play right now, darling.
I know my fees are expensive, but if you give me this money, we will take the other
parent to the cleaners. And you just have to say this.
I want the house.
You're not having the house. I'm having the house.
It's my house and I want the car as well.
It's my car.
It's my car.
I pay for it.
You're not having anything.
Mummy, Daddy. You're still my mummy and daddy, aren't you?
Men and women complement each other, and we do in our own little way. We teach kids the balance of life, and I don't think my children have had that at all. Do I think they're grown up to fulfil their potential? Not a hope in hell.
Being stronger, kinder and wiser are the three things that parents need to be. And that's a challenge to all of us. Me, even as an unseparated father, being stronger, kinder, wiser is hard. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for families post-separation. But I think it's something that we need to measure ourselves against, and we need to get support to be able to do that well.
Start taking responsibility for what you're doing. Start thinking about your children's future and how you're going to make it better for them.
I won't say a word to my daughter about her mother or against her mother, because it doesn't help my daughter. I will only do the positive things for her, and that's to make the most out of every minute that we have together, to make sure that, you know, she's, for the 2 months that I have, I can provide her that fatherly role, and later in life, you know, be there in whatever capacity I can be.
If people really want to act appropriately and do what is best for their children, the last thing they want to do is engage the family court.
No one ever wins. The financial impost is enormous. The personal impost is enormous. You know, the idea of spending the better part of a day in a witness box being cross-examined by someone who can range over a 15-year marriage is dreadful. The personal cost of that, I can't imagine for myself. But I've seen people very nearly broken by it. The ordeal is just horrible, even if they've got nothing particular to hide or be ashamed of.
You wish that you could say to the parents before they go down this track, well, okay, you want to separate, be sensible about it, and don't get into a fight about who has what and who does what.
Will you, for God's sake, stop your feelings being hurt? This is unjust. I'm going to pay him back. I'll make him suffer. And please just concentrate on the children.
It can be a really hard struggle, but we have to look after ourselves at number one. We have to be the best person possible because our children need it and they deserve it. And the better you are as a person, I think the better parent you are.
You know in your heart that you love your kids, and you've got to have faith that, you know, your kids are resilient, and you've got to just hang in there. Make sure that you're looking after yourself because you'll be the best dad you can be.
I've got this belief and hope that one day my children will come back to me. Now it's maybe a false hope, but it's given me stimulus to live.
Somehow you've got to move beyond the fact that he had an affair. Sometimes you've got to move beyond the fact of what she did in walking out and just find a way to cooperate for the sake of the children. That's not easy. That requires an enormous amount of commitment and forgiveness and willingness to look to the future, not to the past.
If we started instead from the understanding that both parties are absolutely equal, notwithstanding, you know, someone who is really abusive or someone who's done the wrong thing, if you start from that basis, then your perspective is different.
Every cent I get, I try and save. So they go, even if I never see them, they're going to get X amount of money in an inheritance. And I keep thinking that, oh, can I do without this? Because I want them to get a little bit more for their inheritance. I've been told, why are you going to give them any money? You know, they're not going to talk to you. They're my children. That's why I'm going to give them whatever I can.
I just make sure that when I see her, I'm in the most positive mindset I can be. And the same for my family, you know, they feel all my heartache and all my pain. But, you know, just like we all do, we just get on with enjoying the moments and really cherishing every single minute we have together. And hoping that in the long term, things can change, because it's happened to me. It's happened to other people that I know, unfortunately, and it happens all around Australia.
Happiness would be the one thing I'd want for my kids. If they marry someone that really they want, enjoy their time.
There's no words. It's like as if someone reaches into your heart, grabs it, takes it out, squeezes it in front of you and just throws it away. It's like, no, you know, that's my daughter, that's my flesh and blood, that's, you know, the person who I love most in the world. You know, I would gladly give my life if I had to choose from her.
Don't believe everything you heard about me. You missed out on a great deal of life, kids. That's all I can say. Yeah, you missed out on life.